There it is. The 2023 F1 season is finally over. Abu Dhabi delivered pretty much exactly how it usually does. It was definitely not the most exciting race in the entire world, but we're going to talk all about it. We're going to go over our race quick hits. We're going to go over our weekend winners and losers, and then we'll wrap it up with our predictions result for the predictions we made before the weekend began. And yeah, we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it right here. Let's get it started right now. What a weekend it was, the finale of the 2023 F1 season, coming off of the first inaugural Las Vegas Grand Prix. F1 and the entire grid heads to Abu Dhabi to finish out the 2023 season and style like they always do. And boy, oh boy, what a season finale it was. We got a bit of a spicy little things up and down the field. We had a few battles that were going on. Obviously, P2 in the constructors was still up for grabs, as well as a couple of positions in the drivers' standings, which they always say, you know, they don't care about that much. But at the end of the day, they all want to finish as high as possible in the drivers. We're going to talk all about it. Let's go ahead. We'll start things off, obviously, with who finished first most times this year out of literally anybody else on the entire grid. Max wins his millionth race this year. I think of the 22 races, he didn't win 3, and it was like 12 of the 13 of the final, however many. It was a stupid amount of races. Red Bull win all but one of them. Obviously, Carlos Sainz taking the win in Singapore. But what a dominant season for Max. He was the first F1 driver to eclipse 1,000 laps led in a single season. Obviously, when you couple that with the most dominant car that the sport might have ever seen, and well as the most amount of races we've seen in a single season the calendar has ever seen, that record was bound to fall eventually, but it definitely doesn't. It still tells the story of this season. So congrats, Red Bull. Congrats, Max. Hopefully, and I mean this in the most earnest way possible, I hope this never happens again. Looking at Charles Leclerc race. Charles had a fantastic weekend this weekend and trying to do literally everything he could to drag his team to P2 in the constructors. Basically, we saw through the entire back half of this race where he was essentially trying to do his own race, run his own strategy, and try and do whatever he could to drag and claw Ferrari, kicking and screaming to P2. But unfortunately, it wasn't to be, as Carlos ended up just really behind the 8 ball all season, or all session long. A poor qualifying, followed by a very odd strategy choice by Ferrari, basically doomed them from the beginning. At that point, Charles basically needed the win, and we all know that was never happening. So, Charles, that was a fantastic race. So you still came home to finish P2, tried your literal best to drag Ferrari with you, kicking and screaming. It just wasn't quite enough, but absolutely fantastic race. Well-deserved result this weekend, and I know it wasn't the season you wanted, but it is what it is. We're going to go into more detail in terms of season-wide things here in the next few days as we go back and do our season review video here in a few days. But I wanted to touch on that in a little bit because, Charles, you did everything you could this year, and boy, you must be tired. Let's see. Moving on, Mercedes definitely had a tough weekend finishing out this season. It seems like, for whatever reason, the last 4 or 5 races this year, just for whatever reason, they just could not get a grips on the W14, and I'm sure they're more than excited to get rid of it for the final time. I know Lewis is in particular, and I'm sure George isn't as broken up about it as he might seem as well. McLaren had a very decent weekend. It looked like they were on for a pretty decent result this weekend before a couple of qualifying snafus and some higher than normal tire deg just kind of really put them in tough spots. But they still get a solid double points finish as they obviously finish the season much, much differently than they started it. Aston Martin actually had a very decent result to the finish of their season. A double points finish for Aston Martin definitely wasn't something I was expecting, but hey, got to give it to them when it happens. Finally, shout out Yuki Tsunoda. For whatever reason, Yuki seems to do fantastically in Abu Dhabi, and his weekend was no different. His highest qualifying position, I think, in his AlphaTauri career. Someone might have to fact check me on that one, and comes home to finish in the points as well. What a weekend from Yuki, and he got driver of the day. Very much deserving. Let's see. Williams eventually hold out on to 7th in the World Constructors Championship. Yuki needed to finish P6 to pass Williams for 7th position. Unable to do it. I think he finished P8. So he did his best, but Williams was able to hold on. And a tough weekend for Williams. Definitely not something we were quite expecting, especially with how good of a qualifying that Alex Albon was able to put in. And then finally, now that the season is over, only 97 days left before the 2024 season. We cannot wait until it gets here. Moving on to our weekend winners and losers. We're going to start off with our weekend winner, and I think it goes no further than saying that Yuki Tsunoda, absolutely the weekend winner. There was a lot of talk basically all year this year about who was going to be, this person that could potentially be in line for a Red Bull seat. A lot of people were talking about Liam Lawson. A lot of people were talking about Daniel Ricciardo specifically, especially as the season wore down. And Yuki Tsunoda responded like an absolute beast, and inevitably finishing probably his strongest few races back to back, culminating in this result here in Abu Dhabi. Yuki, absolutely wonderful weekend on the pace and really put that car in places that not many of us really expected to. He tried to put the team on his back, especially this weekend, trying to claw P7 from Williams in the Constructors Championship. Unfortunately, was not able to do so, but absolutely fantastic weekend from you, Yuki Tsunoda. Congratulations. Moving on to the other side of that coin, our weekend loser. In this one, we've gone for a team rather than a driver specifically. There's probably a few drivers that could be in contention for this, but I went for Ferrari just because, especially after the pace that Charles was able to extract from the SF23 in qualifying, putting it on the front row, having Carlos knocked out in Q1, and then given one of the most odd strategies I think I've ever seen from a team, especially at Abu Dhabi, really just put them behind extremely, trying to get P2 from the constructors from Williams. We talked about it a little bit in the quick hits, but what an odd decision. Obviously, Carlos getting knocked out in Q1 was never part of the plan, but there's probably a few ways that they could have strategized their way into getting him more than a few points. He showed really decent pace all race long, but the decision to go hards, and then hoping for a safety car where there's only ever been 8 safety cars in 15 seasons racing in Abu Dhabi, I don't know if that was quite the move. Surely, it was going to be tough no matter what, but that Ferrari should have been quick enough to kind of stay in the points if they got a little more aggressive. Maybe do a true 2-stop, let Carlos use the tires, push on. And we saw even on very used tires, he was holding his own for the most part. He ended up falling back a little bit towards the end, but at that point those tires were completely destroyed and there was basically no hope. And ultimately it didn't end up mattering anyway, as he ends up retiring from the race on the final lap. So it is what it is. But Ferrari, I don't get that one. I don't think a lot of us got that one. We don't blame you too much for just full sending it, but there must have been some other way, especially when you only finished 3 points behind Mercedes for P2 in the constructors. So I'm sorry, Ferrari. I don't really see the vision. Doesn't mean it was a bad one, but for me, I think on the grand scheme of things, that was your P2 to potentially lose, especially with the problems that Mercedes was having with their car. All right, we'll wrap things up here with my predictions results. Every week before a race weekend, I like to make my predictions for what happened, and we're going to talk about how my predictions fared for the season finale in Abu Dhabi. We'll start with my pick for biggest positive surprise, and I went for Oscar Piastri. Now, this one looked like it was very on the pace after qualifying, as Oscar put it in an absolute blinder for P3 on the grid, and it was looking pretty good. If you're in the Discord, you saw me kind of, puffing my chest out a little bit, getting a little gloaty. But obviously, when it came to the race pace and the higher tire degradation than we might have been expecting, especially with Oscar, who's not the best at saving tires as of now. It really was a tough result for him. He ends up finishing P6, I believe. So not a bad result, but I definitely think we saw other results that were much more deserving of biggest positive surprise. I did give myself a half point because, season finale, we got to be a little generous around here. So I gave myself a half point just because that P3 in qualifying, and he actually had a clean race. Like I mentioned in the predictions video, it's been a minute since we've seen Pastry have a clean weekend where he got to kind of show his stuff in pure pace and not being sidetracked with damage or odd scrapes with other drivers. So a clean weekend plus a very solid result for Pastry. Absolutely worth half a point in my eyes. Of course, I am grading myself, so who knows? Moving on to my pick 4 biggest disappointment, I went for Aston Martin. My reasoning before the weekend began was just that it seems like Aston Martin has been kind of punching above their weight a little bit, and I kind of expected them to fall back to earth a little bit, especially at a circuit like Yas Marina that I don't know really suited their car too much. Now, that said, a double points finish for them, absolutely none deserving of biggest disappointment. I think we saw a lot of other drivers or teams that might have struggled a lot more. And so I can't give myself the point here, but an absolutely pretty decent result for Aston Martin as they try and build some momentum going into the offseason. So unfortunately, no points for me on that one, but I don't think I can blame myself for picking them the way I did. Moving on to my qualifying results, my top 3. 1.5 points out of 3 here. I did a Max Verstappen pole position, check. A Lando Norris P2, which looked on until Lando made some key errors in qualifying that kind of held him down the order. It's really starting to irk me that he has the pace like he does to finish like this, but just makes those mistakes. So that is a little frustrating. And then a Charles Leclerc P3. Obviously a half point for Charles being in my top 3, but in the wrong position. Definitely wish I would have swapped those around just because Charles has been kind of a qualifying legend recently, but I just really felt like Lando was going to come out and have a good result, which again, looked like it was, but ultimately not enough. Looking at my race podium predictions, a Max Verstappen win, check. A Charles Leclerc P2, check. And a Lando Norris P3, non-check. Obviously, George Russell came home to finish P3. Definitely one of my better podium predictions. 2 out of 3 points there. Not sad about it at all. Again, Lando probably should have been up there, all said and done. But at the end of the day, we can only predict what we think is going to happen. And I didn't predict him to make those mistakes. So it is what it is. And then we'll round things off with my Haas predictions for the race weekend. I made 2 of them, one of which was 1 car into Q2. We absolutely nailed it. Shout out Nico Hülkenberg, making a return to form on his qualifying pace that he seemed to have a lot this year, but was really inconsistent these last handful of weekends. So shout out Nico making it into Q3. And then obviously a poor start from Nico, and the Haas tire wear kept him from anywhere near. But that brings me to my second prediction of a no points finish for Haas. And I know this is kind of cheating, but I wanted to bag a point here for myself just because if worst case scenario and I reverse jinx myself into giving Haas points, I'm not going to be mad about that either. So, yeah, the Haas car, not good. They finished 10th in the Constructors, not good. We're going to cover more of this in my season review video, but the poor tire wear and a bad start from Nico really just put us behind the 8 ball on this one. And we really knew it was going to be pain when we saw Kevin Magnussen box on a lap 6 from mediums to hards. So that showed me literally all I needed to know in this one. And I kind of went about my happy day focusing elsewhere. So that is 2 points out of 2 in my Haas predictions. And give me some props. I finished 6 out of 10 possible points in the season finale. That might be my best, if not the best, result that I've had this entire season. My first season of making predictions, definitely not going to balk at a 6 out of 10. We're going to go over my final points totals in our season review, but it was definitely a few weekends that went really poorly and a couple of weekends that went decently, but we culminated it all with a 60% correct rate, which I'm taking every single day of the week. But guys, I think that does it. It's a pretty quick turnaround. We still have the Vegas review video coming up soon. I'm working on that a little extra because I was there. So be on the lookout for that here in a few days. And if you're interested in getting involved in our postseason our postseason review conversation, hit the link in the description to join the Discord. We're going to be talking about it there, and that video will be coming here in a handful of days as well, potentially at the end of the next week. I got to try and spend a little bit more time on that. We're going to go team by team, not necessarily weekend by weekend, but we'll go team by team and kind of outline what we saw from them in the year, and we'll see what they have to look forward to in 2024. But guys, that wraps up our final post-race recap for the 2023 season. I hope you enjoyed the videos. I hope you enjoyed the season as much as we could. Obviously, it was kind of a lot of same at the top, but up and down the field, we saw a lot of good points and a lot of good battles here and there on any given weekend. So I really enjoyed it. I'm even more excited to follow this and do these again for 2024. I'm already cooking up my predictions for next season, so we'll have to find out what we're gonna do. So at the same time, this has been so much fun. I appreciate you guys coming back and participating in these. Let me know down in the comment section below what your favorite moment from the 2023 season was or the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix weekend itself. But that's going to wrap it up for me here. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on the notifications so you don't miss a single upload. And guys, I'll see you in the next one.